They are the captains now. What Bo Prabula and Sam Horn both being named captains tells me about the quarterback battle.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso, and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And as we inch ever so closer here to the kickoff of 2025, I want to take more of a quarterback view of the left tackle position. I'll make sense of that here in a minute. And I apologize for teasing my thoughts on the Michigan scandal here coming up. I promise I'll get to it here at the end of this episode. Also want to remind you today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And I have to say, there's some interesting stuff happening this weekend in Mizzou football. A practice at Lindenwood University in the St. Louis area this past weekend, I believe St. Charles to be exact. And originally, according to Eli Drinkwitz, this was just going to be a simple practice that turned into a scrimmage. And my first thoughts there were, well, that means the quarterback battle very much is still open, or so it would seem. But also I had a second thought. I also thought that this seems like a road trip simulation, and that seemed to be something that was confirmed by Missouri here, as Missouri's first actual road game isn't all the way until October 18th at Auburn. So why not wake up your team a little bit to some unusual circumstances here? And to Drinkwitz here, I actually think a little bit of a slow start here, according to Drinkwitz, by the Missouri special teams and the offense. I actually think that works actually in Drinkwitz's favor here. If he wants the team to just, hey, wake up a little bit. He was saying in the post-game here, the post-scrimmage comments here, that I didn't like the slow start and basically put everybody on notice. You know, that's kind of one of those negatives that you can turn into a positive, in my opinion, if you're a coach. But to the point here on the scrimmage, just like the previous one, some DNP coaches' decisions here for sure. Like, for example, I'm guessing Ahmad Hardy may have been, if not held out of the scrimmage, at least limited. I think Missouri knows what it has in the young running back there. But unlike the previous scrimmage, I am, again, guessing here because the Tigers did not share with the media who was held out of said practice. And also, well, not nearly as much access to said practice. However, I will say the previous practice, Gabe DeArmond, among others, praised Missouri for at least getting more access to that scrimmage than most of the SEC does. So I will certainly join Gabe in my praise of the Missouri program here. But the openness stopped there, and that does tend to tell me that the quarterback position is still open, at least openly. Missouri wants the rest of the nation, certainly the Kansas Jayhawks in week 2, to think that is the case. I will say, with Missouri naming both of these guys captains, Bo Prabula and Sam Horn, each being named captains, well, along with Connor Tollison, Cayden Green, Zion Young, Khalil Jacobs, Dalen Carnell, Jalen Catalon, and Logan Muckey, a special teams specialist, without a doubt. Well, that's a lot of captains, first of all, you might say to yourself. They're not going to put all 8 guys, I believe, that are listed there. I don't think all of them are going out for the coin toss. So if you're thinking that's a lot of captains, it's probably because it is. So if you think that's giving you a clue on who's going to start the game, well, here's what it's giving me a clue on. If I'm looking at it from Eli Drinkwitz's perspective, this doesn't tell me a whole heck of a lot. What it tells me is Eli Drinkwitz is signaling to whoever the backup quarterback is, whoever loses this job, hey, no pouting. We need you to be a leader regardless. So buck up, get your chin up. And by the way, in the SEC and, well, all levels of football, a whole lot more often than not, I would say your backup quarterback is going to get in that ball game. Obviously, Brady Cook was a tough guy who toughed it out more often than not, but even last season we saw a couple starts that went to Drew Pine. So no matter who wins this job, if you're the backup quarterback, man, keep that right shoulder like the kid who was trying to take Cam Newton's job in the commercial all those years ago. Keep that right arm loose, without a doubt. And more on those Missouri captains, by the way. I thought it was notable that not only the two Missouri starting quarterbacks were each named captains, but Bo Pribula and Jalen Catalon were the only newcomers named captains as well. I thought that was notable, the only transfers on the team. Hey, a quarterback, that's pretty obvious. If you wonder why Jalen Catalon might be one as well, it's all about experience. And many times I've said, if you're an everydayer, you're well aware that I've said that Eli Drinkwitz seems to value experience over, well, just about any other value that a player has. And Catalon has about as much experience as anybody in the country, playing for Arkansas, by the way, all the way back in the 2020 COVID season. So I just think that Missouri is, well, when it comes to the captains, there's a lot of mystery there. I just think naming the two quarterbacks, yeah, that's an unusual move. Once again, I think that's more of a, hey, telling your backup quarterback, keep your head in the game. That's what I think. And for as much as a lot of this stuff is coach speak this time of year, I do think you can get some hints from what Eli Drinkwitz says. And he did say recently, and this was before this most recent scrimmage, I suppose you could take a basketball term and call it a secret scrimmage up at Lindenwood if you want to some extent. But he said traditionally, and again, this was a couple weeks ago when Missouri had a previous scrimmage, this is the last time we will go live, but we'll see. We're always evaluating. And I'll just say this, if I were a coach, the chess match of X's and O's, well, that really appeals to me, that part of the game. Also, I love being part of a locker room, a team, the locker room dynamic. I love all of that stuff. But I got to say, the modern balance of trying to find the balance between, hey, I need enough live reps here to feel like what I have, to feel like my team is actually ready for football, enough live reps to not only get them ready for it, but for me and my coaching staff to evaluate everyone. I need live football reps, but at the same time, there's a balance between obviously that and, well, wearing your team out, exposing them to injuries, lower body, concussion, everything. Obviously, you want to avoid that as much as you possibly can. Injuries are an enormous variable in this sport. That part, though, just sounds like an absolute nightmare to me, because how do you find the right balance in this physical and violent sport? I'm simply glad that I don't have to figure that out. And we aren't even getting to the nuances of recruiting high schoolers and glad-handing 60-year-old rich guys, as my colleague Stephen Willis from Locked On Ole Miss would put it. Yeah, I don't want any part of that. I'm glad to just be behind the microphone. Eli Drinkwitz and his staff, they get the big bucks for a reason. And coming up, I truly do understand any Missouri fan who's worried about the Missouri offensive line and the reshuffling this late in fall camp. But here's a simple question. If Cayden Green is truly the best NFL prospect, number one, if he's the best Missouri offensive lineman on this roster, then maybe it's just as simple as putting him at the most important position on the offensive line. Is that simply the worst thing in the world? Let's talk more about Cayden Green, of course, more on Mizzou football coming up here in just a minute. But my goodness, has it been hot in Missouri here lately. If you're like me, despite the incredibly hot temperatures, you still want to get out there and hit a few golf balls. And also you have actual things you need to take care of. Lawns to mow, weeds to pick, Well, it gets dangerous out there. Well, that's where DripDrop comes in. I got to say, when I'm on top of my hydration, I notice everything works better, my energy, my mood, my focus. Well, DripDrop is doctor developed and scientifically proven for a fast hydration, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. And I got to say, I love keeping this stuff in my golf bag. Helps me power through the round. Just dump some into a big old thing of water, swish it around, and you're good to go. Right now, DripDrop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to DripDrop.com and use promo code LockedOnCollege. That's DripDrop.com. Promo code LockedOnCollege for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. As sports fans, we want everything for our teams to be ideal, and I completely understand that. I really do. But let's think more about Cayden Green here and his move from left guard to left tackle, because once again, as I said in the tease here, if he is just simply the best option, maybe that's not the worst thing in the world. I made, by the way, and to the point of asset management, if you want to look at it that way, I made a point a few weeks ago, and here's what I mean about taking a quarterback view of the left tackle position. I made the point a few weeks ago that if Sam Horn ends up winning this starting quarterback job, well, some Missouri fans will say that whatever assets in NIL that Missouri spent on Bo Prabula, some have said as much as $1.5 million for this season. That's been the word on the street. Well, some Missouri fans would say that was a big-time misallocation of resources, that basically, wow, you just spent $1.5 million on your backup quarterback. Well, you might as well just lit that money on fire, huh? Well, that's one way to look at it, but that's not the way I would look at it, because quarterback is such an important position that if you're Missouri, I don't think there's any way you could come into the season with just Sam Horn, who's coming off of an injury, a guy with very little experience at the college level at the position, and of course Matt Zollers as a true freshman high schooler. For as much as I love his upside, and a lot of other people do too, you can't simply rely on those two guys. So bringing in Prabula or any other high-level type of guy who you think, hey, this guy can at least come in and be a starter at the very least. He'll at least come in and compete for a job. At the very least, we need options. We need depth at what is an astronomically important position, the most important position on the roster. Well, if I'm making that point about quarterback, well, left tackle is about as important as any other position on the roster, especially on offense. Maybe I should be looking at Johnny Williams and Javen Richardson the same way. Another couple guys that Missouri added in the portal. Of course, a couple of guys that Missouri was hoping were going to compete and did compete at left tackle. Well, number one, those two guys combined almost certainly did not cost what Bo Prabula did. So, number one, that's a really important piece of information there. Secondarily, Missouri also, in my opinion, needed options, just like at left tackle. It needed options at left tackle, just like it needed options, and it needed depth at quarterback. Just like you can't put all your eggs in one basket, I think, at the quarterback position, you don't want to do it at left tackle either. It'd be one thing if you did that at the punter and place kicker and long snapper positions that are indeed important. Every position on the field is important at a certain point, but not all positions are equally important, which is why, to me, you stack talent at quarterback. You stack talent at offensive and defensive line, as Missouri has. I can't really question the asset allocation here. And the point here is that we don't really know We don't know how Cayden Green's going to perform at left tackle. I think he'll do pretty well there. I think he's a guy who has versatility, and that's, well, one of his best assets, I think, as a player. But I also can't say how this shuffling is going to affect the rest of the group as well. So if you're worried, if you want to be worried, if you're the type that is worried, well, I'm not going to be able to talk you out of it. I just think that, and you certainly might be proven right to be worried, but I think we can also, I think there's as almost equally of good of a chance that we'll look back at this and laugh at a certain point and go, oh, so Missouri just moved its best offensive lineman to left tackle, and that's what we were panicking about. In a few weeks, we could just kind of all look back and laugh on this, or maybe it's somewhere in between. I will say this, again, back to we all want it to be ideal. Yes, in an ideal world, whoever Missouri brought in the portal at every position would have been the ideal fit. But while certainly portal, I think you're going to hit a higher batting average in the portal than you are in the high school ranks. Well, nobody bats 1,000. I think you look back at anybody's portal history, anybody's high school history, even Nick Saban. Hey, even the best classes he's ever had, he's going to look back at a few of them and go, ooh, wow, I can't believe I recruited that guy. And recruiting services are going to look back and go, oh, man, I can't believe I ranked that guy that high. Again, even in the best of times, you're going to make mistakes. I promise you that. So don't be too hard on Missouri, because so far I think they've managed the portal really well, and I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. That's my main point right now in a vacuum of information. And on my previous episode, I talked about how Matt Miller, a prominent NFL scout, talked about how he thought Missouri had way too much talent, NFL talent in particular, to not be ranked in the top 25 preseason. Well, I said I wasn't going to list all those guys, but you know what? Another NFL scout helpfully did, named Jacob Infante. And one thing was, I noticed, well, let me just give you the list real quick here. Cayden Green, Jalen Catalon, Dalen Carnell, Damon Wilson, Connor Tollison, Chris McClellan, Brett Norfleet, and Kevin Coleman. Notice that Green and Tollison are the only offensive linemen listed there, by the way, and clearly we're not moving Tollison off of center. So once again, why not put your best NFL prospect at left tackle? The only one I would really question there, by the way, is Brett Norfleet, a guy who I just think needs to show an ability to stay on the field a little more to be a true NFL prospect at this point. He certainly has some passing game, some big-time passing game upside. I want to see him hold up more at the point of attack, and also just want to see him be healthy, simply put. So having all those different guys, let's see, how many guys are listed here? 3, 6, 8 guys listed there, as many guys as Missouri had captains, by the way, potential NFL picks. I think there could be, not even including Ahmad Hardy there, by the way, who is an underclassman and would not be eligible in this upcoming NFL draft. So that's a real bullish case there for sure, and that's the bullish case on, well, the Missouri offensive line situation working out. The bearish case, well, why didn't that happen in the spring? That's an obvious question, and one I don't have a great answer for at this point. And once again, after throwing heavy penalties at the Missouri Tiger athletics programs, well, over the last few years and decades, wouldn't you know it, the NCAA, much like it did with Kansas and Bill Self and its basketball program, allows Michigan to skate. You know what? I have got my thoughts coming up. Apologies, by the way, for teasing this in the previous program and not getting to it. But also want to talk about John Mateer, Oklahoma's quarterback, his gambling allegations as well. Let's get to that here in just a minute. But first, I do want to talk about Gametime, because if you ever wanted to head to a ball game at the last minute with friends or family, Well, Gametime makes it easy. And you know what? We're getting very close, of course, to Missouri's kickoff. I'm telling you some great deals on Gametime, all-in pricing, fees included, $24, section 104, row 61, to the opener for Mizzou football against Central Arkansas. Great deals, as always. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So you may remember a few years ago when a Missouri tutor basically blackmailed Missouri after she had, of her own accord, completed homework and tests for 13 athletes and basically blackmailed Missouri saying, hey, give me $5,000 or I'm going to squeal on you. Well, Missouri self-reported that violation, and for being honest, well, the NCAA rewarded them with a postseason bowl ban. Now, Michigan, on the other hand, which has blatantly violated the rules. And here were the actions, by the way. It is specifically prohibited to send individuals, by the way, from your organization, from your athletic department, your scouts, your coaches, whatever. You're not allowed to scout in person for future opponents. So that's number one. You're also not allowed to use electronic equipment, including cameras and phones, to record game film or film signals, by the way. So Michigan got completely and utterly busted. In the year 2023, it won the national championship. But they're fine. According to Nicole Auerbach, by the way, here's what happens to Michigan. Her tweet says the NCAA says there was sufficient grounds, by the way, for a multi-year postseason ban. But, quote, however, the panel determined that a postseason ban would unfairly penalize student athletes for the actions of coaches and staff who are no longer associated with the Michigan football program. Well, that is hilarious to me because even though that logic is fairly sound, that has not been a standard by the NCAA until, well, 5 seconds ago, apparently. It truly amazes me the rules and standards that the NCAA makes up or fails to follow its own previous standards when a team like Michigan or Kansas basketball is involved. And again, the NCAA continues here, quote, Harbaugh ran a program that was largely dismissive of rules compliance. There was little, if any, emphasis on following the rules. In the past, I've heard that kind of description called a lack of institutional control. And that phrase generally will trigger not only postseason bans, but possible show cause type penalties for coaches and loss of scholarships and all kinds of stuff. But somehow when Michigan does it, we're going, well, Jim Harbaugh, since he was smart enough to escape out the back door to the Los Angeles Chargers, come see, come saw, we're just going to brush all of this under the rug. I mean, it is truly hilarious. If Missouri hasn't learned this lesson before, it's definitely the lesson is this. Fight everything tooth and nail, deny, certainly never self-report any type of violations. Again, sweep everything under the rug. That is clearly what the last few years has taught us, especially in the NIL era. I mean, the NCAA has simply told us that nothing is going to happen here. And finally, Oklahoma quarterback John Mateer, a transfer from Washington State. Real good player, by the way, a very interesting prospect for sure. Well, it appears he might have done a little sports gambling in November of 2022, according to his public by the way, Venmo transactions. For those of you unaware of Venmo and what that is, well, basically, again, it's an electronic peer-to-peer payment type of deal. Well, it also has a social media type of aspect as well. If you're familiar, of course, as I'm sure all of you are, with Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any type of social media, well, you have a feed, and your feed will show your friends putting out their thoughts, their pictures, whatever it is. Well, just imagine people do that with their transactions as well. So if I'm paying you for, hey, we're splitting a meal or something like that, I might put paid X, Y, or Z for Shakespeare's Pizza. It's not going to say how much, but it's going to say that we had an interaction here. If you're of the older generation, you're asking yourself, why would anybody want this information public? I too have the same question. But indeed, this exists. And what happened in November 20th, 2022, John Mateer had a public Venmo transaction that said sports gambling, UCLA versus USC. And another one on the same day that said sports gambling. Both of these transactions with the same individual. Mateer went on to say that this was an inside joke. Am I allowed to ask any follow-up questions about said inside joke? What was the joke? Just make me understand. That's all I really want to do. I'm not even saying the joke has to be funny. I just want to get it just a little bit, because when you say sports gambling, UCLA versus USC, I mean, on paper, that's not the most hilarious punchline I've ever heard. But again, maybe there's a context here. As I say on this show all the time for you everydayers, context is king. So John Mateer, by all means, give me some context, but my eyes are definitely raised here, and especially for a really important Missouri opponent here coming up in November. So, hey, thanks for joining me here on Locked On Mizzou. Thanks for, well, not yelling at me online about not paying off that Michigan segment in the previous episode. If nothing else, I've proven I will clean up my messes. So, appreciate you joining me here, as always, on Locked On Mizzou. By the way, if you want to be a local advertiser on the show, hit me up anywhere on social media at Locked On Mizzou or lockedonmizzou@gmail.com, and I'll get you pointed in the right direction. So until next time, I'm John Miller, and this has been Locked On Mizzou.